Hello. Welcome to the January 2nd episode of Occupy Western North Carolina Report. My name is Ann, and this is Avram from Canary Coalition and also Occupy Western North Carolina, and Corey from Occupy Western North Carolina. And today's episode had been supposed to be an interview of a campaign member from the Mark Meadows for District 11, representative to the United States Congress. But they did not respond to my invitation my invitations, and they did finally send an email about why they had supported the recent tax bill, which didn't relate to what I sent them. But anyway, that's beside the point. Here we are. So we've decided to revert to Occupy's overarching theme, which is supporting the everyday person vis-a-vis the 1%, which seems to be bent on oppressing the other 99%. And in this particular case, how that expresses itself in environmental degradation, which is Avram's specialty, and he graciously volunteered to be our interviewee today. So we're glad you're here, and let's proceed. Do you have any questions for Avram, Corey?
So what's the Canary Coalition been up to in terms of environmental legislation?
Well, on top of running Mountain Stream TV, the Canary Coalition spends a lot of its time fighting what Duke Energy is doing in North Carolina. And Duke Energy, as almost anyone familiar with politics in North Carolina can tell you, is probably the most single powerful political entity in the state. And it's primarily because of their ability to make campaign contributions to almost every nominee of both parties for during political campaigns.
Both parties.
Both parties.
Oh yes, both parties.
Yeah. They win no matter who wins. Duke Energy wins.
Yeah.
And what's wrong with them making campaign contributions to whichever candidate wins the election?
It enables them to have undue influence over the state government. And as a result, Duke Energy maintains the regulated monopoly system. We have a legal monopoly.
Regulated legal monopoly?
We have a regulated legal monopoly system for the power industry in North Carolina.
Regional monopoly. And they justify it by saying that the cost of installing the hardware is so great that they can only do it if they're guaranteed control of said hardware indefinitely.
Well, and at one time, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, it probably made sense to give Duke Energy that status because otherwise rural electrification probably never would have happened in North Carolina.
Now, this is in the 30s.
The 30s and 40s and the 50s, when North Carolina
was 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Right, and the reason was because we were trying to modernize and provide electricity for rural communities where it would not have been profitable for any energy industry to bring in those power lines and provide power for those. But times have changed dramatically now, and with the advent of decentralized renewable energy resources like solar and wind energy, it would be much more beneficial for the public to have competition among private companies competing for who can provide these smaller scale.
Now, by energy, you mean electricity.
Electricity, but it's beyond electricity now, because what Duke Energy has now done is they've purchased Piedmont Natural Gas Company. And Piedmont Natural Gas provides natural gas. It's got a monopoly on natural gas in North Carolina, basically. And since Duke Energy is now
heating and cooking.
Yep.
for heating and cooking and providing electricity. Because now they're building natural gas power plants. This is all as a result of the fracking industry and the glut of natural gas
So
on the market.
Duke Power promotes fracking.
Duke Power absolutely promotes fracking, but more than that, it is providing a infrastructure to keep us dependent on fossil fuels and natural gas for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
Because they're investing billions and billions of dollars in this new infrastructure. They're building a pipeline, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, in conjunction with Dominion Power in Virginia, that will bring natural gas that's been fracked in West Virginia through the entirety of Virginia and throughout eastern North Carolina, from just north of Rocky Mount on the Virginia border all the way down to Pembroke. The entire eastern side of North Carolina is going to be a 210 or 20-mile pipeline.
They're taking it to a seaport?
No, they're taking it to Pembroke, where supposedly it's going to be distributed to Duke Energy's various new natural gas power plants that they're in the process of getting permitted to build.
So how about somebody like me who buys their electricity from a co-op? I'm not a Duke Power customer.
Yes, you are.
I are.
Your co-op is reselling you Duke Power.
That's right.
So
Duke
if
is the only producer
if you
of
have electricity in North Carolina and you pay for it,
It's coming from Duke Power.
you're
There are a few
giving
exceptions.
money to Duke Power.
There's a few exceptions. There are some towns right along the Virginia border which are buying from Dominion Power, and in the extreme west, in like near Murphy in that area, they're buying from TVA. Everywhere else, now there are. I think there are
those companies
14.
also promote fracking and environmental degradation.
They do, but there are. I think there are 14. Electric co-ops in North Carolina, and those 14 co-ops all predate the time when Duke Energy gained its monopoly status. So they're grandfathered in and they're allowed to operate and sell power. Nobody else, including you, if you had a solar panel on your roof, you could not resell that power to a neighbor or to anybody.
So back up to the co-ops.
Yes.
So even if they were grandfathered in, they still have to buy their power from
Duke Energy,
Right.
unless
The
they
co-ops don't
own
produce
their
it.
own.
Well,
They might. Some of them might own like a dam.
yeah.
That produces a small amount of electricity. People don't realize,
Right.
there's this thing in the
Carolina.
public mind that we produce a considerable amount of power through hydroelectric power. It only amounts to 3%.
And
statewide,
A lot of those dams are owned by Duke.
Some of them are owned by Duke anyway, right? There may be
big
one
ones.
or two that are owned by electric co-ops, but they still have to buy most of their power from Duke Energy.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Well, and not only does Duke own the dams, they own the lakes.
Right.
And they have exclusive right to use the lakes. So if you have a lakeside home, say on Lake Fontana, you want to build a dock, you have to get a building permit from Duke to build a dock at the end of your property on their lake. So, yeah.
Well, I knew they controlled most of the waterways because as a paddler, a lot of times whether or not I can get on the river is dependent on if there's a dam release,
Yes.
and you have to contact Duke Power
Right.
to find out when that's going to be and if it's going to be, unless you're an outfitter and already have a calendar with those dam releases.
Right.
So so they even, whew, that's a little disconcerting. So what you're saying is that Duke Power has such an inordinate influence on the politics in this state because their extreme wealth allows them to make very large campaign donations to every single candidate of every single campaign.
Well, that's not exactly true, but a majority and
The important ones.
all the leadership
Yeah.
in the House and in the Senate, North Carolina House and Senate, the governor's office, and every statewide office, Duke Energy makes campaign contributions, and they do it through their employees' political action committee, and they do it as individuals they make individual donations. The management does. So it's all legal. Don't misunderstand me.
Yeah, oh yes, I understand.
It's all legal, and Citizens United reinforced that, and made it even more pernicious, But yes, and they're not the only ones that have made disproportionate donations and have disproportionate control over legislators, but they're the biggest spider in the web, so to speak.
Let's back up just a little bit. So
Yeah.
they're the biggest spider in the web. The web covers the whole state, and the web consists of coal and natural gas, which is fracking,
and nuclear power.
So nuclear power, fracking, and coal extraction. They're all extractive industries, and they create power or electricity.
And climate change,
and
air pollution.
So that's where I was going with this.
Yeah.
What's wrong with this situation appears to be working for people. Why is this a bad thing? Why do we not want Duke Power to be in control of our politics in North Carolina? What's that got to do with environmental degradation?
Well, because there are things we can do to address climate change and air pollution and water shortages and all of these things that are exacerbated by the production of of electricity through fossil fuel and nuclear energy. There are things that we could do that an open free market would allow to happen. Solar energy is now the fastest growing energy sector in the entire world, including in the United States of America. But the transition could be happening much faster if it weren't for laws and regulations that Duke Energy keeps in place in North Carolina that prevent that.
So say that again. Solar energy is the fastest growing industry.
Energy industry.
Energy industry.
Yes.
In
the world.
The world. That's what I thought you said.
Yeah.
And yet it's being obstructed by Duke Power in this
by
state.
Maintaining that monopolistic system.
And not just Duke Power, but Dominion and
yes. And the fossil fuel industry, the natural gas industry,
and
the fracking industry,
yes.
the oil industry, the nuclear industry.
Which, if you look at who actually owns the stocks of these companies, the pool of people is very small.
Right.
Is that right?
There's only a few hundred people in the world who control most of these companies together. And they own enough stock in each of these separate companies. So even though it looks like these companies are in competition with each other, under the hood, if you look at their engine, right, they're stockbrokers, they're stockholders, and they're major stakeholders.
The bottom line.
Their names are the same across these companies. They're the same people, the same families.
Boy, this is an education for me today.
Well, I'm saying this to show how this all ties back to the 1%.
Yes.
To the same group of just a few hundred people who control global resources.
Yes, but so how does that play out with solar power being the fastest growing industry in the world?
How does it play out? Well, there are many different entities, many different industries in many different countries that are competing with each other to make the solar age blossom right now, and there are several big players included in that. And but solar energy is an inherently decentralized industry, because you can put solar panels on your roof and stop paying Duke Energy on a monthly basis.
I just can't sell it to my neighbor.
You can't at this point in North Carolina. You can't. In other states, you can, and in other countries,
is that right? Other states and countries, you
now,
can.
Yes.
In North Carolina, you are required to have your home hooked to the power grid in order to maintain an active circuit of occupancy, or a certificate of occupancy, which is, filed at your local register of deeds in your county.
Isn't that interesting? I do know that in Georgia, if you do not have a Georgia Power source or pole or line on your property, then the local sheriff is not allowed to come onto your property without your permission. Isn't that interesting? So if you are off the grid in the state of Georgia, you are off the grid
Right.
in legally. You can break the law on your property, and you can.
Well,
That's very interesting.
It is very-
I wasn't
case in
aware
North Carolina.
It's not
of
the
what
case here.
Corey just said. I was aware of the opposite situation, whereas if you can't get a
Certificate of occupancy.
no, you can't get a power hookup unless you have passed inspection and received a certificate of occupancy.
No, you have to have the power hookup first to get the certificate of occupancy.
So you can't even live on your own property until you have signed the line.
Well,
join-
You can. You just can't get a certificate of occupancy.
okay, because there are people that live
You
off
can,
the
yeah.
grid.
You can live in your house. You can own your house without a certificate of occupancy. What you're going to have a really difficult time doing is reselling it.
Right.
Is because
That's
mortgage
true.
brokers will not put a loan on a house that does not have a certificate of occupancy.
So you can't,
At this
if you
point.
if you want to live off the grid in North Carolina, you can do it.
Yeah.
You just have to stay there forever.
Or wait for it.
You can't sell it.
Or when you want to sell it, then you get a hookup to do that.
Yeah.
Or sell it to somebody else like yourself.
Right.
Or just cash buyer.
Or, yeah, well, that's what
Yeah.
cash buyer, yeah.
But yeah, that's right. So
So all is not lost.
right.
So we do have options. What are our options?
Well, it's the options of any citizen at any time. We can fight it. We can resist it. We can resist Duke Energy. And the way the Canary Coalition is doing that is in several ways. One of the things, we've joined the We the People, North Carolina We the People campaign to fight against the money in politics. And we're working to get a U.S. constitutional amendment that says that corporations are not people, money is not speech, and that corporations can't make unlimited amounts of donations to political campaigns. And we see that as an ultimately environmental issue as well as a social and economic issue. That is basic to the environmental movement and to this social progress movement, the voting rights movement, the women's movement, the labor movement. All progressive movements are dependent on getting the money out of politics because that is the chief impediment to making progress. That's what's going to release solar energy and make it a viable option in North Carolina. That's what's going to release wind energy and other forms of renewable energy that are being held back because of Duke Energy's monopolistic, the fact that they are a regulated monopoly. And let me just make clear what that means. As a regulated monopoly, the exchange for being a regulated monopoly, it means that nobody else can sell power in the region that they've been granted a monopoly in. And at one time, there were several entities, but Duke Energy has gobbled them up one after another. We used to have Nantahala Power and Light in Silva, in Jackson County, where we're sitting. Duke Energy bought them out. Then the only two entities it came down to was Progress Energy and Duke Energy, and Progress Energy was another enormous, gigantic, multi-state power company. And when they merged, Duke Energy became the largest power company in the country, in the United States of America.
And so there's these regulations that make this legal are made in local state government, general assemblies,
Yes.
because the candidates that we vote for and elect who pass those laws are basically in the pocket of Duke Power because of money in politics.
Right, but let me just finish what I'm saying here.
Sorry.
So that's one end of the monopoly system, is that Duke Energy gets to be the only seller in their area of monopoly, which is now the entire state of North Carolina.
Right.
In exchange, what the state demands of Duke Energy is that they have to provide power to everybody reliably, and the state gets to set the rates. So Duke Energy can't just automatically jack up their rates at will, although basically they do anyway.
And they can,
but
because they
on the
own
books,
they own
the state,
laws.
it's the North Carolina Utilities Commission that sets the rates. Duke Energy asks them for a rate hike. They have to go through this whole process of public hearings, and which is a good thing. And then the state sets their rates. But the rates, the third part of this monopolistic arrangement is that Duke Energy, as a regulated monopoly, is guaranteed a rate of return on all its capital expenditures of approximately 10%. Okay? Now, that's a pretty good guarantee for any business. That means that if they spend $1 billion on a new power plant, they are guaranteed a return of $1.1 billion. So it's really good for their business to keep building more and more infrastructure, because every time they build more infrastructure, they make 10% profit on that. And we're talking about, again, billions and millions of dollars.
So it pays them to have the fossil fuel industry growing.
Exactly. But not only the fossil fuel industry, but energy consumption. They want to promote energy consumption. The more energy that people and businesses and industries use, the better it is for their business. And the more infrastructure
it comes from fossil fuels,
they have to, regardless of how they're producing it, whether it be...
Well, if they're producing it, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
If we switch to solar, that would not be the case.
The reason that so many people are focused on fossil fuels is because they have already invested heavily in it. Right? They have purchased the equipment to drill for the oil. They have purchased the equipment to mine the coal. These are really big investments. And they back these investments because there's a guaranteed source of capital in the ground. And in order to get that investment back, they must extract that resource and sell it. So that is why there's so much push against green energy, because the biggest investors on the planet are invested heavily in fossil fuels. And they want that guaranteed return.
But also, it's because solar energy is an inherently decentralized source of energy, and so it becomes a threat to their monopoly. That's right. They want to maintain control, and fossil fuels and nuclear energy lend themselves to a centralized power grid, whereas solar and wind energy lend themselves to a decentralized power grid, and that's what they're wary of. And that's what they'll do anything to stop. And that's what they're doing in North Carolina. They've tightened up, they've made it more difficult for small producers. They're building solar farms, or they're encouraging the use of solar farms, because they're attempting to use solar energy as a centralized power source with a solar farm. But that really is the worst way to do solar. It's very wasteful because there's a power loss, over the transmission lines.
Transport the power from
you have
where
to
it's
transport it tens of miles or hundreds of miles away, and you lose a lot of energy in doing that. But
peak hours are after dark, so if you have a large solar farm, you need a large battery bank.
And they have no battery banks.
They didn't invest.
So right now, the only time that solar farms are actually producing something useful is during peak hours when the sun is shining.
Yeah.
At all other times, that energy is being wasted because there's already a glut of energy on the power grid from the baseload nuclear and coal and natural gas plants.
Well, the natural gas plants, they run in the evening when it's after.
Those are peak natural gas.
So what, do they use that as an argument against solar power?
No, against.
They could.
Only against solar farms.
Against solar farms.
Right.
But they do use it as an argument against solar power.
Well, they will use it.
Yeah.
They'll say, look, we tried this and it didn't work because we used it in the wrong way. They're not going to say that last sentence. But
the reason they built those solar farms is because the federal government offered them subsidies to build solar farms at one point.
Well, and also North Carolina passed an integrated resource plan or rather a renewable resource portfolio plan, which mandated that by the year 2018, actually, a certain percentage of energy would have to come from renewable energy resources, which was a totally bogus law because some of the things they define as renewable energy are not at all, like methane from hog waste and things like that.
Right.
Burning chicken carcasses from chicken factories, you know, cutting down forests. Cutting down forests to burn the wood, that they consider that a renewable energy resource.
Yeah.
And so solar energy actually only amounted to 0.2% of the renewable portfolio family.
Oh, but it looks good in pictures.
It looks good in pictures, and that's what the solar farms are doing, is they're making up that 0.02%.
So they're being used as greenwashing
Yes.
for Duke Power.
Exactly so.
Exactly what it is.
Exactly so.
Oh my.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to We the People. That's how we get money out of politics. And if you'll remember, the second Occupy Western North Carolina report episode was about the We the People campaign. So you can go back and watch that if you would like to. And also I'm going to ask you the website for the We the People campaign if anyone would like to find out more if they don't already know.
It's ncwethepeople.org.
ncwethepeople.org.
And on that page, you can sign a petition to the state legislature of North Carolina to. We have two bills that have been introduced. It's House Bill 453, Senate Bill 354, which will create a referendum in this year in the 2018 election that will allow North Carolinians to vote on a U.S. constitutional amendment to end corporate personhood and declare that money is not speech and reverse the Citizens United decision of the Supreme Court. So go to ncwethepeople.org and sign that petition, download paper petitions, and get others to sign it, and go to the part where it says, what is the phrase that's used to contact the Rules Committee?
The tab at the top of the page says send a message.
Yeah, send a message to the Rules Committee, because that's where the bills are stuck right now in the Rules Committee, both in the House and the Senate. We want to get them out. And we need a big uprising in North Carolina to get the money out of politics. We've become the 20th state in the country to deliver this message to Congress about the U.S. constitutional amendment. So let's get busy, North Carolina.
Okay. Well, this has been very informative. I've certainly learned a lot. It seems as though I've pulled the lid off a can of worms. I kind of knew. I mean, there was the can and it said worms right on it, and I kind of knew what was in there. But now that the lid has been ripped off, I'm a little horrified, and figure
That's
out
why most people don't want to look that close.
how to eat worms. Okay, well, thank you for tuning in. I do encourage you to visit North Carolina, wethepeople.org, and also to come back and watch our show again next month. We're here every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, every first Tuesday of each month at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We have a 30-minute show, and it's always very interesting. Thank you.
And why don't you tell everybody when the next Occupy meeting is? And where it is.
We also have Occupy Western North Carolina meets every second and fourth Tuesday night of the month at the Sneaky Squirrel Brew Pub between Dillsboro and Silva. And we have dinner together at 5 o'clock. 6 o'clock. We changed it to 6 o'clock. And then the meeting is at 7 o'clock in a private room behind the brew pub. And it's always really interesting. Always really fun. So anyway, thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.
Okay.